Classic Jam by Doctor and the Medics. Or was it Norman Greenbaum? No, it was Norm and the Green Bums. That's actually what we called it. That was fun. Shoulder still feels like absolute garbage. Sitting like this is probably the worst thing I could do. I have a pinched nerve. And I was like, hey, I have a pinched nerve. Life will get better. And then it didn't. So I was like, yeah, I should see my doctor. Doctors are important. We'll see my doctor. So I called my doctor's office and they're like, well, your doctor's on vacation. Come see this silly boom schmookle of a old man who types with one finger. And I was like, okay, sure. I go see him. I'm like, yeah, I've got pain. And he's like, it's COVID. And I go, no, it's not COVID. It's definitely not COVID. So he's like, it's COVID. And I'm like, dude, I guarantee you it is not COVID. I do not have a risky life. You know, someone could go, oh, but you DJ'd at Vern's. Yeah, but I already had the symptom of pain in my shoulder that travels down my arm and zucks. So it's not COVID. And in his little peasy little brain, he was like, what's like COVID but not COVID? Pneumonia. Because you got pneumonia. And I'm like, I don't have fucking pneumonia. What are you talking about? And he does the little thing where they breathe, you know, he listens to me breathe. He's like, yeah, you've got pneumonia. You've definitely got pneumonia. I want to send you for a chest x-ray. And he freaked me right out. So I go get a chest x-ray. And the next, I canceled. I was supposed to DJ again tonight. And I canceled on Clint for that. Just because I was like, I don't want to do it last minute. If it turns out that I actually have pneumonia, I don't want to leave him high and dry. And go to the thing. I get the X-ray done. I call back the next day, and I'm like, "What's the story?" Get the doctor on the phone, and he's like, "Yeah, you have pneumonia." And I was like, "Oh, like the X-ray showed I have pneumonia." He's like, "Oh no, not at all." Then how do you figure I have pneumonia? He's like, "Oh, I heard it. I heard it." Okay, dude. And I should mention, I did tell him that A, I'm a smoker, and B, I have seasonal allergies that are in full fucking pollen up my nose mode right now. And he's like, yeah, no, it's not that. It's definitely pneumonia. I don't believe I have pneumonia. I believe I have a sore arm from a pinched nerve, which is exactly the thing. So eventually I got him to give me some advice on pain management because that's why I went in the first place. I wasn't sleeping at night because it would hurt too much, and that's not fun. But it literally, like, he didn't even, the day of my appointment, he didn't even tell me how to deal with the pain. He didn't hear anything about the pain. All he heard was, you have pneumonia or COVID, of which I have neither, so fuck that guy. So I'm still not DJing tonight, just on the off chance that I actually was to have pneumonia and that this quack was right. I don't want to run the risk of infecting other people. It just seemed like a poor decision to not cancel. But yeah, I'm annoyed. What can I say? So I was watching a Twitch stream the other day, probably a couple weeks ago actually, and the topic of homeschooling came up, and I was like, homeschooling is garbage. It is destructive to like public education, which is a vital thing. And all the people in the chat who were like lefties were like, what do you mean, guy? And I talked about it briefly, but I want to go into a little bit more detail on why I hate homeschooling. It should be noted that one of my children was homeschooled for many years. I won't go into the particulars of why or how because it's not my story to tell, but one of my children was homeschooled. I was absolutely dead set against it. And in retrospect, I was absolutely right. Well, I guess the first one is the big reason, and that is I'm not a teacher. I've been a teacher and I've taught college, but I am not a teacher of junior high, elementary, high school, whatever. That's not my area of expertise. To assume that I could just do someone's job as well as them seems pretty half-assed. Teachers have education behind them on how to effectively engage with people, and that's good. And we appreciate that. Yay, teachers. Right on. The bigger issue to me is the threat to public education. I think that a educated workforce is vital whether we are a capitalist economy or not. I'm a firm believer that education good. As someone who was homeschooled, it is literally the most detrimental thing you can do to a child. I totally agree. For the child, it's a lack of social exposure that, parents are always like, oh yeah, we make up for it by he's in karate and he's taking music classes and he's in that woodworking group and play dates on Saturdays. Sure, but that ain't the same thing as being in a school, having to spend 8 hours a day with kids that actively hate you, which was my childhood. Um, it's a very different thing entirely. Um, my ability to teach my children, even if I've got curriculum that's all sort of laid out and everything, um, I can teach them simple things that I know. But what about complex subjects? How am I supposed to teach my kid logarithms? How am I supposed to teach my kid quadratic equations? I don't really remember them. I might be able to bone up, but maybe I couldn't. I wouldn't be the right person for that role. Um, to assume that I could just teach anything is pretty ridiculous. I'm more than happy to help my children and to try my best to understand the content that they're working on and help them through it. But that ain't the same thing by any stretch as being an expert in teaching this. And expertise is important. Homeschooling is an attack on expertise because it's the assumption that any idiot, literally, can teach conics, can teach organic chemistry. No, not valid. Um, the big concern I have with homeschooling, though, is that so the way that we have homeschooling implemented here, it doesn't take away from if you are homeschooling your child, you are still paying your taxes, and they essentially have like a school that they are registered to where they receive the benefit of that tax for that child, or the government programming for that child. So it doesn't directly undermine the system in that regard. But what is a thing is the potential for that to be abused. Conservatives hate any kind of public anything. Public health, public education, public sector, public, terrible. The more kids are homeschooled, the more conservatives will use that as a platform to change the rules and say, see, our school system isn't working. Homeschooling makes more sense. Why don't we should privatize more. A private school system is terrible because you do not get the same education if you're in a private school that you would if you're in a public school. These are facts. The goal of education should be an egalitarian thing where all people have access to the same level and quality of education. When people go, yeah, but my kid's private school is, you're just getting a better education. A, you're probably not. And B, okay, then we need to fix things so that all of the schools are on a par. You shouldn't get a benefit just because your parents are rich enough to put you in a private school or willing to make whatever sacrifices are necessary to put you in a private school. I just think that's wrong. I think that the purpose of school is to grow the brains and the thinking abilities of children as they become closer and closer to adults, so that they are that much more effective when released into the wild. I think that's a really good thing, and I think it's an important thing. If we're living in a capitalist economy, we should want to have kids who are capable thinkers and have a wide, not necessarily a wide range of knowledge. Like quadratic equations are never going to come up at the workplace. You're never going to need to know how to factor a polynomial. But what that does is you learn by learning how to do that. You're learning critical thinking and you're learning abstract problem solving. And those things will definitely come up and will definitely be really beneficial. I just don't think privilege should define whether or not someone gets a better education. I think all kids should get a high quality education, and that shouldn't matter if they're poor. Where I went to high school, they did this whole partner school thing where companies would partner with a school, and my school, which happened to be a school with full of rich kids, our partner was IBM. And IBM provided us with some computers way before schools had computers as a typical thing. They gave us all kinds of technological stuff that was really helpful to that school. At the same time, my mom was teaching in a community called Falconridge, which is a much more poor community. And their partner was Canada Safeway, who every year took the grade sixes on a tour of a Safeway. Imagine the opportunities that those kids had. Yeah, as an egalitarian, we should be improving education across the board for everybody. And there's just no arguing the idea that an educated workforce is a good thing. My social anxiety and lack of skills are 100% because of me being homeschooled. Yeah, totally. When I got thrown back into the public school, grade 7, lovely year to do that to someone, they had to do a standardized test and went well, just passed him and, sorry. They had me do a standardized test and went, well, just pass them and we'll deal with it next year. After seeing my results, yep, mom, anyone could be a teacher. Yeah, the reality is that homeschool, there are kids who thrive in a homeschool environment, absolutely. Most kids do not. And I've never been a believer in it. When my child was in homeschooling, again, not my story to tell, but when my child was in homeschooling, it was a necessary evil, but I was not happy about it, and I wanted it to not be a thing. Frankly, the whole concept of education, I think we're completely ass backwards on. I think that post-secondary education should be free. And people go, oh, but Jim, who's going to pay for it? Fucking tax the rich, tax churches. I don't care who pays for it. It should be free. It benefits our society to have people who are educated. And not necessarily educated in only STEM careers, which of course everyone goes, well, yeah, I mean, it makes sense that you could want an engineering degree to be paid for, but what about women's studies? What about women's studies? Is there anything wrong with someone who wants to be, maybe work in social work or wants to, be a academia person in the realm of women's studies? There's nothing fucking wrong with that. It will benefit our society for that person to have the opportunity to do that. It would mean building more schools, employing more post-secondary education instructors, getting a general boost to people. And yeah, it costs money, but that money comes from rich people, which I'm fucking fine with. Fuck them. They also benefit out of having a more educated workforce because their workforce comes to them already knowing how to think better, already knowing how to do the jobs that are specific to that industry better. So who fucking cares? It's stupid to argue. And then on the topic of like student loan repayment. So I paid off my student loan. It took a long time. It was hell. Oh, my poor neck. But I did it, and I'm happy I did. But you know what? If I hadn't been able to do that, that would have been crippling for me. Right? People who get educations that don't immediately land them in a position like I was, where I was able to get into a career that was actively hiring and hiring at a fairly decent rate of pay with lots of opportunity to improve. That's not every field. It's not every graduate that gets that. And shackling someone, front loading them with debt like that is just completely silly. We want educated people. We want people who understand. And, and I get there's the Brave New World idea that A's don't want to take out the garbage. 100%. I get that. Not everyone's going to go to university. Not everyone's going to be interested in a university education. But if you are, and if you have the ability to do that, why would we stop you just because of finances? That is stupid and unnecessary. So, yeah. Fuck homeschooling. Felt bigger in my head.